Welcome to Accessible, where we open the door to the people and ideas shaping the disability community. I'm George Gatto.
And I'm Amelia Reigard.
On Accessible, we talk with leaders, advocates, researchers, and individuals with lived experience to explore the issues shaping the disability field.
Accessible is produced in partnership with the Missouri Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental Disabilities, or LEND, and the Missouri University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, or UCED for short.
And whether you work in the field, are connected personally to disability, or simply want to better understand how systems can support people with disabilities, Accessible opens the door to conversations that matter.
We're excited to be back for Season 5. Our first 4 episodes focus on advocacy in action.
Advocacy happens on many levels, from public policy to workplaces to everyday decisions in our communities.
In this series, we're exploring how people turn their values into action.
And no matter what your role, there's a place for you in advocacy.
In this first episode, we're focusing on family advocacy. We're joined by Heather Lytle of FACT, a family-led organization that supports families of children with developmental disabilities and behavioral health needs through advocacy and peer support. Together, they explore why advocacy is a lifelong skill, how families can navigate complex systems, and how to build confidence, even when you don't have all the answers. Let's jump in to hear George and Amelia's real-time reflections after the conversation.
I loved this conversation that we just had with Heather Lytle from FACT. And, I guess I hadn't realized that they had the 10 steps to advocacy or effective advocacy. I forget what she called the program, but it was really interesting to me. And I felt like after talking with her, I wanted to take up that training.
Yeah,
I know. Could benefit.
I thought the same thing, which is why I was like, where can we get this training? I think what an asset it is for the St. Louis area to have a great organization like FACT in their neighborhood that is doing great education and training around advocacy. And I think for me, one of the big takeaways from the conversation was when Heather talked about how they prepare families for advocacy by talking about that you're an important member of the team, right?
Yeah.
And your voice and your opinion and your thoughts matter, and how to respectfully do advocacy, whether it's in a school setting or maybe a healthcare setting or whatever that looks like when you're working with different systems. But just thinking of yourself as a teammate and that positioning, like we talked about in the conversation, really leveling the playing field in terms of power dynamics. And I think what a great mindset to go in with when you're navigating systems. So that was definitely a takeaway for me personally, I think, as a parent, and then also, just great overall.
Yeah. Sometimes I think, I even run into this. I think something feels almost impossible. Like I can never do that. I can't imagine doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But sort of the way she, just listening to her talk about it, it's like, oh, you just have to do this, breaking things down into steps in terms of going and talking to someone in a power position or who has perceived power, at least over you, just makes it feel doable to me in a way that, oftentimes in my life, I just think, gosh, that feels too overwhelming to go and ask for something or, or anyway. So I really appreciated all she had to say about that. It was great.
Yeah. It's always nice to learn about different organizations here in Missouri that are doing awesome work. So good conversation. Yeah. Hope everyone gives it a listen.
Heather, I think that you were one of the first people that I ever met when I started working in Missouri. And I was trying to remember, what was that project that you and I were doing about 16 or 17 years ago?
So we were having you come and do focus groups for the families that we served to get just data on our programs and how people were feeling about it.
Yeah. Anyway, that was just, I remember like Heather's always been one of my favorite people in the state because she's the first one that kind of gave me a chance to be a partner in Missouri. So
that was a long time ago.
It was. I don't think I had any gray hairs then.
So much has changed.
I know. Right? Like literally every hair has changed. So.
Well, maybe for our listeners then who are a little unfamiliar, Heather, with who you are and what you do, could you talk a little bit about the organization? Was it the same organization you're with now 16 years ago that George was doing focus groups for, and tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
Okay, yes. So I work for Family Advocacy and Community Training, also known as FACT, and my name is Heather Lytle. I'm the executive director. And FACT is a family organization. So we hire people that have children with disabilities, might be mental health or developmental disabilities or both. And they have lived experience, and then they support other families that include a person with a disability. And so we have multiple. We have family support. We have on the developmental disability side. Then we have family support on the mental health side, and then we also provide educational advocacy.
Do you serve families throughout the state or in the St. Louis, St. Charles area, or?
We are in 6 counties in the city of St. Louis, so basically the St. Louis metro area.
And you guys also, it seems like you have a pretty strong advocacy for individuals with lived experience as well.
Yep. We also are the lead agency for People First of St. Charles. We have the People First chapter, and People First is a group of adults with developmental disabilities, and they advocate for different things in the community and at the state level. Random things. One of the things that they worked on a couple years ago was the asset limit for people with disabilities. So it was at one point in time you couldn't have more than $999 or something around there before your benefits would be affected. And so the People First group advocated in the Capitol to get that raised. We had one member specifically who needed dental work done, serious dental work done, and she was trying to save some money to get the dental work done and could never save enough money to do it.
So when you talk about like you do advocacy for families or work with families, what does that look like? So families just reach out to you, and like what kind of needs do they come to you with? How do you guys come around them and support them?
Okay, so it's mostly, even though we have different programs, the way we support is the same. For if somebody comes to our educational advocacy program, for instance, it's because the student is having issues at school. And it might be that a parent calls us because the school is calling her and it's usually the mom, sometimes the dad, but usually the mom, calling her every other day saying to come pick her child up from school. And so it's affecting her job, her ability to work, whatnot. And maybe the kid doesn't already have an individualized education plan. And so the parent will call us and say, I need some help. I'm not sure what's happening. I suspect either they know or they suspect that their child has some sort of disability that's affecting their ability to be successful in school. And so we go through the entire process. So we tell them how the special education system works. We choose a priority, whatever their priority is at the time. So it might be if it's discipline or if it's, I feel like my child needs reading help. They can choose one priority. We work on that one at a time. And then we'll go to the meetings with the parent, and our advocates are well aware, well informed about special education law, even though they, of course, are not attorneys. But they know all of the special education law. And so they strategize with the family. They go to the meetings with the families and then help to get whatever the family is hoping for in the IEP within the confines of what is possible. And so that's how we work there. For our family support, our parent support, that's a way longer service. On the educational advocacy side, we just serve them, through the priority issue, and then we close. For family support, parents come to us for many different reasons. Our whole goal is to give parents the skills, tools they need so that they can successfully keep their child in their home, get their child's needs met. We all know that anytime you have a child that has any specific needs, you have to access different systems. And so if a parent has a child, let's say, that is maybe nonverbal, maybe on the autism spectrum, and not only does the parent maybe need help at school, our parent partners can help that, even though they're not the same level of expert as our educational advocates, but also maybe the parent isn't aware of any other of the community resources. So we might help the parent get the child eligible for the Department of Mental Health, which opens the door in our area to access resource board services like ours.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
Oh, I just think it's such a cool, comprehensive program. And I can't believe I don't know this right off the top of my head, but are you guys part of like a national network or a statewide network? And if not, who came up with this great idea for Greater St. Louis?
Well, so originally, parent peer support, at least for in our area, there was a grant from SAMHSA where it lasted, maybe it was a system of care grant, lasted maybe 3 or 4 years or so. And that's when it started, where we started providing parent support, and we partnered with Kreider at the time, Kreider Health Center. It's now Compass Health Center. They provide the clinical person, and then we provided the parent support partner. And the whole goal was to wrap around the family, right? Give the family the services they need with the family driving the bus, so to speak. So it was a different sort of model than what once was, where maybe the professional would tell the parent what to do. In this model, the parent is saying, these are my needs, and then the service providers help get those needs met. And so that's when it started here. And then there was a movement to get resource board funding for the Children and Communities Resource Board funding, which is that money comes from sales tax, like in St. Charles County. Not every county has a Children's Resource Board, but that's when FACT was able to secure consistent funding after the SAMHSA grant went away. And so we have been doing this since 1999 for behavioral health. And then in 2014, we started serving families that have kids with developmental disabilities, and we received that funding from the Developmental Disability Resource Boards.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty neat that you got all that county support across those, what is 5 counties. So when you talk about advocacy for families or family advocacy, is it like something that you say, okay, here's how you do it, and here's what you need to know, or is it more of a sort, almost like a lifelong sort of relationship where you're how does that work for you
So
guys?
we hope to give the parents the skills and tools they need to be advocating for their children or themselves throughout their life. And really, there's always a system and a process to advocating, and you can apply it to any single thing in your life that you'd like to advocate for. I mean, you first of all have to know your rights. You have to know the law surrounding it. Are you somehow being discriminated against, or is there something within the confines of the law that's wrong, that shouldn't be happening because of whatever reason? You have to know who's in charge and who makes the decisions. And you have to be able to go up the chain when things are not going your way. So if I am, for instance, advocating for my child in school, and I'm told that, nope, they're not going to evaluate her because they think she's fine. And I say, well, I disagree with that. I have to know that, first of all, I can disagree with it. I can get an independent evaluation that's paid for by the school. I can go above that team, and always we want to encourage people to start at the first level. You're starting, in this case, maybe you're starting talking to the teacher, and then you're talking to the people who are doing, making the decisions. But I wouldn't, for instance, go to the superintendent of the school district first thing, right? But you certainly can do that, or like in other situations, I'm not going to call my legislator if I've not taken all the steps that I can take to get my needs met. You don't want to jump too far ahead. You want to try and go in order. It's way more effective, and then you're hopefully not burning bridges. You're hopefully able to come to consensus with whomever it is that you're disagreeing with.
Yeah, that's a really great and I think important part of the advocacy is realizing that you can disagree with professionals. Because I think that often, as a parent and as or a family member, you're the expert on your family system, right? Your child or the family member that you're advocating on behalf of. But these professionals wear these hats, right? They have all these letters behind their names. They have all these credentials. And I think even as a person who's in this field and talks about advocacy pretty regularly, there's been times I've had a hard time when it comes to getting my son what he needs at school. Or I've talked to the principal and I'm like, man, I wish I would have said, I disagree, or could we revisit this? And it's always hard to, how do you coach families through that? That sort of like, I don't want to call it imposter syndrome, but a little bit of like, that power dynamic, right? Where it's like there's an authority that individual holds, right? In a hospital, in a school system, and you come in with the authority of your family, your knowledge about your family and your needs and what needs to be met there.
So mostly we try to, one of the first things we do when we start serving a family is recognize that they're doing great. Things are hard. It's hard to raise a child with any sort of issue. And so oftentimes parents are isolated and maybe their family doesn't understand or their friends don't understand what's happening with their child. And so we want to go in there and say, we know how it feels. It is hard. It's okay that you say it's hard. And we're gonna help you get through this. But when you go to an IEP meeting, for example, and there's 10 people in there and they're using language that you don't really understand, um, yeah, really, it's you want to try and get help, but mostly the most important thing to know is that you are an important part of the team, and it is expected that your voice matters. So if you know that walking in the door, I'm an equal part of this team, my voice matters as much as anybody else's here, and there are steps I can take if, for whatever reason, they don't agree with me. So there's always, I don't want to use words like fight, but there is always someone else you can talk to about things. You do not ever have to just accept what somebody has told you.
That is such a great point. So, do you have, or does FACT have, the way you said that, it almost sounded like this is a model that you've written down, or that you have sort of, know your rights, know the law behind it, and then the other steps that you said. How do you do training around those things to all the families? And
Yes, 10 steps to effective advocacy, and one of the steps is get somebody else on your side. You don't have to do it alone. Ask for the help that you need. And another thing is, even when you're in an uncomfortable meeting or you're not sure what's happening, it's okay to say, I don't understand what you just said and I need you to explain it to me. And it's also okay to say, I need a minute and leave, or I can't do this anymore today. We're going to need to reconvene.
yeah,
I mean, there's lots of different tactics and strategies, but as long as you know that your voice matters, it's much easier to say those things and believe those things. And another thing is, we always try to be respectful. You can say anything you need to say respectfully. You don't have to yell, and it's better not to. Once you start yelling, then the people you're yelling at become defensive, and they're not able to hear you any longer. You've just shut down all communication, which is hard. It's hard when you're super emotional about your own child and somebody's telling you, we're not going to do this, when you desperately believe that your child needs this support. And then you're thinking, well, you just don't even care about my child, or you don't understand. And rarely is the caring part true. People aren't generally in the educational setting because they don't care about children, right? And so there's always some reason why they're saying no. And all you can ask for is, I want the data behind your no, or I want you to give me your prior written notice to say why you said no, so that I can keep track of all of this information in case I do have to take it forward. So that's another thing. Keep documentation of every single thing you do.
yeah. Uh, Amelia and I work with this woman who's from Tennessee originally, and she was telling me that, because she sometimes coaches me on how to have conversations, with different groups, and she's like, you could say anything you want, but you just say bless your heart at the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to say things very directly and bluntly, but I just smile when I say them.
You smile.
Those are those interpersonal skills. Yeah. Yeah. When you can put that Southern etiquette on the end of it, bless your heart, she can say just about anything. But I love that framing of being able to come with a mindset that I'm an important part of this team. And I think that levels out that power dynamic right away, and say, this is a team effort. And also the generosity of giving the benefit of the doubt, until proven otherwise, right? That they do have the best interest of your kid or that family member or this situation, but that we're a team and that I can ask the right questions. And I think knowing the questions to ask is really important too, right? And so Heather and I do have a bit of a work history too, George, together, which is through a project we did from the Missouri Developmental Disabilities Council. I don't even know how many years it's been since we wrapped that one up. Maybe 6. I think my daughter was just born around that time, so it might be 6 years. But it was a lay educational advocacy curriculum, and 2 FACT employees who were amazing trainers who know all there is to know. It seemed, you just said we're not attorneys, but man, did they know the law inside and out around IDEA and 504. And so they provided this great training about like, these are the rights, that students with disabilities have in the educational setting. And here's what you need to know. It's like a baseline starting point to ask those important questions in those meetings. And I just couldn't say enough about. I was new. I was project manager, so I was not a subject matter expert here at all. But I was learning so much from the things that they shared, and I know that their training was in high demand. And for your organization to have been in existence for as long as to start as a 3-year kind of pilot project through a grant, and to have a sustained program for decades now shows the real need that families have around learning these steps of effective advocacy, learning the laws and rights and things like that. That's not a question, I guess. It's just so like woohoo of fact. And Heather, the things you guys are doing are just truly amazing.
Yeah. Do you guys still use that, Heather? Like the MOLEAP?
So we do still have that curriculum, and we do. So we tried to do something different. I mean, sometimes my advocates, they want all the parents to know everything they know. And so they're like, we'll get them in here. We'll get them this training. They're going to learn it all. And I have to say things like, not every parent wants to learn it all. I mean, I'm not going to go become an accountant because I want to learn how to do my taxes, right? I'm going to ask somebody who is the expert to help me. And so one thing we have been doing is we've been trying to look at different trends happening. If there seems to be, I don't know, a whole lot of disciplinary actions or disciplinary actions related to one specific thing in a specific district, we might say, okay, we're going to have a training on discipline. And we'll do that, but then we try to get other community partners or other child serving agencies there too, so that parents have the opportunity to talk to, maybe one of the organizations that provides therapists or whatever. So if maybe like one of them was on bullying, so it's not only what can I do in the educational setting to help my child, but what does it look like if my child is being bullied, and maybe a therapist can talk about that. And then how do I, besides trying to get it worked out at school, what do I need to do for my child so that their mental health isn't suffering? So we've been trying to change it up so it's not just all, 3 days of special education, but little bits, and then also other community members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Heather, I can't remember. I imagine that Catherine mentioned this to you, but this is a partnership with the LEND, the Leadership Education and Neurodevelopmental Disabilities Program at the Thompson Center at Mizzou. And so one of our audiences, and probably our primary audience, is those trainees in the LEND programs. And so, those are professional people who are just getting ready to go into a professional field, whether it's one of the therapies, psychology, occupational therapy, physical therapy, sometimes special education, etc. So when you think about those young folks getting ready to go into their field, what would you have them know about, about families and what, and how to interact with families, or just any advice you would have for them as they enter the field?
Well, I was thinking for educators, I had a friend, and she and I were talking one time, and she was telling me about a little girl in her class who probably had ADHD, and so was flitting about and not paying attention and causing a ruckus, whatnot. And she was saying other kids in the class could maybe go pick up things from the office, and she was saying, I don't ever choose this girl because I don't want to reward her when she's having this behavior. And, mostly I said, it's not a contest. Like, it's not you already have all of the power. It's way better to maybe have the kid that has ADHD run to the office so that they get some of that energy out. So instead of, I just would want to remind educators, there's no winning. You already win. You already have all the power. Right. And so just try to do what you can to help the kids. But I also know that it's very hard. If you are an elementary school teacher and you have 30 children in your class and 15 of them are an IEP, it is hard. And so, I think being able to say, I was a teacher for 5 seconds. I did my student teaching and then I full-time subbed for an additional 3 months or whatever. And at the time, there was sort of this philosophy that you should just be able to handle it. You should be able to manage your classroom. You should be able to handle it. And then you were looked poorly upon if you weren't. And I hope that's not still true today, but I think you should ask for help when you need help. And you should say things like, this isn't okay, or I'm dealing with this and I don't have the skills, I don't have the tools, I've not been given the training. And I think that happens a lot. People are just shoved into positions where they're not really given all the training. They're not really told that you might have 15 kids out of 25 that have behavioral issues. And then you're just expected to deal, which is clearly very hard. So ask for the help.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message. Sorry, look at me. I have my my IHG fidget in my hand, my little puppet. I was raising it up above the eye line in the video. Made an appearance. I got distracted with that. I just think it's interesting because your comment, Heather, is mirrored from the family member to asking the right questions, asking for the help, to the same thing for the professional, right? Within your field, within your role, are you asking those above you who can, organize the professional development day around whatever, disability or subject that you need covered? Are you asking the questions? Are you saying, I need help? And anyways, just to note that mirror the advocacy language. So you're a part of the team too. And are you asking for help when you need it? You and George both had like teacher backgrounds for like 5 seconds. Cause George, didn't you have you were an educator for like a semester too. So
A year. I was a student with ADHD and then a teacher with ADHD. It just was, I don't know. It's weird. It was hard. I didn't know to ask questions.
Heather, it sounds like you work a lot. Your organization works a lot with kids, families of children with disability or behavioral or medical need. You said earlier, we know those kids are going to grow up and transition into adulthood, right? And so does your program talk at all or prepare families for how do you advocate alongside your child as they grow and learn and start advocating for themselves? And what does that transition to adulthood and maybe like advocating on behalf of yourself look like? Is that a conversation you guys run into?
Yes, we try to include, and obviously it's at the parent's discretion, but it's anytime, like regardless of age, if we encourage the parent to have the child involved in the meetings, or at least involved in the part of, this is what's happening to me at school, and this is what might work for me, so that you're not even having somebody that isn't directly affected making the decision. So the IEP team, the parent, whomever, you really do want the child, like my own child, for instance, I started bringing her she was on a 504, into that meeting because I don't know what she needs and I don't know exactly what she's experiencing. And then that evolved into, she was having a problem with one of the teachers. And I said, well, you want me to email him? And she said, nope, I got it. And so expecting your children to early, she was in high school then, expecting them to do those things, but also saying, this is something you're going to have to do your whole life. I was in my 30s before I really learned that I could advocate for, it took me having a child before I understood that I didn't have to just accept things from, random professionals or medical professionals, because before that I did believe they're the professional. They said this, that's just what it is. And then at some point you learn, no, it doesn't have to be that way. But encourage your kids to participate. And even if you don't want them exactly in the meeting, because sometimes those meetings can talk a lot about the deficits rather than the positives. Although I know always we do talk about the positives, or should talk about, what our children are good at, but at least ask them, what do you want? What do you think would work, rather than just trying to assume that you would know. Because even though the family is the expert, you're not more of an expert than your own child is on themselves, assuming they have the ability to communicate those things to you.
I love that. I remember early on, George, I don't know if you remember this conversation, but this was before I had kids, I think. But you were telling me with your son, I think, that you made him call and schedule his own dentist appointments. And you'd be like, look at the calendar, see when mom or I could take you. And like, you got to make your own appointment. And we were talking about self-determination, right? And being that person that kind of enacts things in your own life. And I just thought that's a great parenting. And so I've picked some of those things up over the years from all of this work, right? Is like asking your kid, what do you think we could do about this? Or how do you want to handle the situation? I love that idea, really giving them that agency early. Um, then when they're in a situation maybe where they don't have mom or dad or grandma or whoever that person is to get their thoughts or feedbacks, they have that self-assurance, like, I can figure this out. Like, you know,
Well, yeah. And obviously, once you do something like that once, it's way easier the next time. It's not so scary to do the email or make the phone call. And I also try and say, what's the very worst that can happen? Somebody will say no. It's not ever going to be so terrible when you make a request. And my daughter is in college now, and she has advocated for two or three other people and gotten serious results. And it's because she just deems that something is unfair. And so then she emails and talks to whomever she believes she needs to talk to. I mean, to the point where her first semester, I thought, man, they either love her there or they're thinking, how do we get this girl out? She's always emailing us about random things, but it's a skill that she'll have forever. And that's when we try to empower parents. Once they learn it, it's a skill you have forever. It's not something that ever goes away.
Yeah. Have you noticed? I don't know why this popped into my head, but have you noticed, Heather, like a difference in sort of advocacy or the needs of parents, like pre and post COVID? Or even what people have to advocate for? Is there?
I would say yes. I think there are children still trying to catch up from COVID. We still have instances where kids haven't been in school since COVID, where they're getting, maybe the parents took them out of school to be homeschooled, and then they tried to go back and then they've not been successful. And so trying to ensure that the kids are getting the education that they need. And it affected so many kids so differently. And now it seems like our mental health, the mental health of the children is just way higher, way more prevalent. And I can only assume that that is because of COVID, especially if you were little and then, you were just not around people. And then all of a sudden you're expected to be around people every day, all day. I mean, it's hard. And then some of the kids missed huge milestones and they didn't get to do things that you normally would because, like, go to the prom or, just random things that are part of most people's existence. And then they didn't get to do that because, of COVID and they weren't in school or whatever. And that's not oh my gosh, somebody didn't get to do that. Obviously, people choose not to do that. But it's just one example of the things that kids missed out on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't mean to bring us all down there.
Well, I mean, because I noticed it, like I had, it's a little off topic from what we're supposed to be talking about, but I had one daughter who was a senior in high school during COVID, so she didn't get to have a graduation or prom or any of that stuff. And I think it did sort of bring her down a little bit. But more so, I had another daughter. My youngest daughter was in middle school. Like she was just going. She's in 7th grade, and so and then when we finally were out of COVID, she was going into high school, so she missed those whole years, and I could see that it did have an impact on her. And I noticed that we had to do things differently with her, and she didn't have any sort of disability or anything, but we as parents had to advocate more for her because she kind of lost the ability, honestly, to just be around people in a in the way that she was beforehand, like, and feel comfortable. So, and I can only imagine that for kids with an IEP or with some other behavior or something, it would really be difficult.
Well, sure. I mean, if you went 2 years without getting, occupational therapy, for instance, I mean, not everything could have been done via Zoom. There were things that just could not be done. And so you're just missing out. And so then you're behind, like sometimes years behind trying to catch up. And yeah, so I think it's really hard.
Hmm. Yeah, I do too. I do too. So or go ahead, Tamia.
well, I was just thinking, I mean, to reiterate things you guys have already said, but for adults, it's like this weird blip in the timeline for us. Like that was a crazy wild time where both of the toddlers in one room while somebody was doing a Zoom meeting in the other, and but for it to be during our kids' formative years, right? the impact being different. And I guess noting that, like, what is not that there's a solution, I guess, but what is a trajectory forward other than just acknowledging that? Like, does that change how you guys advocate for services, or like where does attention and time need to be put in so that kids that maybe did fall behind get what they need to sort of recoup those years? I don't know. Maybe that's too big of a question for this podcast today, but it's got me thinking.
No, I think you just see where they are right now and then address whatever the needs are they have right this moment. And if it's still those same things, or, in some cases, it's possible to get those retroactive minutes. If he was supposed to have 30 hours last year and he didn't get any of those hours, well, let's add it on this year so we can try and catch up. And so there is some of that. But really just see where they are and try and get their needs met right now. I mean, we could talk about the reasons for many different things, and, maybe we won't ever exactly know why maybe different things have happened or how much COVID did affect a child, but yeah, as long as you're just addressing whatever their needs are right now, I mean, that's really all we can do.
Yeah. So, Heather, if people want to learn more about FACT, about you, about the stuff you guys are doing, how can they do that?
Well, we have a website, just like most organizations. It is, factmo.org, FACTMO.org. You can learn about our different programs, and, if you're in the St. Louis area, we have different events, fundraising events and whatnot. We are a nonprofit, and I'm sure everybody and their brother is aware that money is tight. State money, county money, fundraising money. And so, things like that are helpful, but you can learn about us on our website.
Heather, is your 10 steps to effective advocacy training something that's done online that people outside of the St. Louis area could tap into? Or
so, yes, anybody can call us and request training. We go around the state and do specific trainings for different organizations. If you are an organization, there's usually a fee. We're only funded in our certain counties. But for families, if there's enough need, we always are trying to, that wouldn't cost families. We'd always, do trainings for families. And we do periodically here. But then, if there was enough people,
So if we can get a group together in Kansas City, you'd
absolutely
come.
Yep. If there was interest and need, for sure.
That's awesome. Great resources.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Heather. It's been great.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for asking me to be a part. It's always fun to talk about your own organization, how great you are.
Yeah.
You guys are great. You really.
Lots to share, lots to talk about for sure. Awesome.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks, Heather.
We're excited to announce that Accessible has a book club. So join the Accessible team for a live virtual discussion of Being Human, Judy Human's powerful memoir on disability rights, leadership, and collective action.
We'll gather on April 2nd, starting at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on Zoom. And the conversation is open to students, faculty, staff, and members of the public. To register, check out the link in our show notes.
And if you can't join us live, no worries. We'll share the conversation later as an episode of the Accessible podcast and on the UMKC Institute for Human Development YouTube channel.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Accessible. Accessible is hosted and produced by George Gatto, Amelia Reigard, and Catherine Toller from the University of Missouri, Kansas City Institute for Human Development, which is the home of the Missouri USED. Accessible is a joint project between the Missouri USED and the Missouri LEND program, which is funded by the Health Resources and Services Administration of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services through grant number T73MC00022. Episodes of Accessible are released every 2 weeks and can be found wherever you subscribe to your podcasts. Join us next time to hear more insights and ideas from leaders in the disability world.